Could you tell us your name, please, and spell your last name for the court reporter?
My name is Matthew Schreiner, Schreiner.
And are you employed, sir?
I am not.
All right. Were you employed in March of 2018?
I was.
And how were you employed in March of 2018?
I worked for WIS International Inventory Service in Eau Claire.
I'm going to have you repeat that. This is where you used to work. What was it?
WIS International.
And can you spell the name of that company?
It's WIS and then International.
Okay. All right. And where were you living in March of 2018?
I was living at 511 Cameron Street.
And that was in Eau Claire?
Yes.
All right. Was anybody else living in that same residence with you?
Yes, I had two roommates, Dave Studing and Alex Woodworth.
And when was the last time prior to March 22nd of 2018 that you saw Alex Woodworth?
I believe it was the Wednesday before.
Okay. And what was your work schedule like at that point in time?
At that time, I was getting up at like 2 a.m. and traveling and working and then coming home by 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Okay. Now, on March 23rd of 2018, did law enforcement come to your residence looking for Alex?
They did.
And did you take them up to Alex's room?
Not the first time that they came.
All right. Second time?
I did.
All right. And when they went up to his room, did you go up with them?
I did.
Did you look in the room?
I did.
Did you notice anything that seemed out of the ordinary with Alex not being around?
Yes, I noticed that his laptop, his journal, and his tablet were all still in his room.
All right. And was that unusual?
I never saw him go anywhere without those things.
All right. Now, are you familiar with the defendant in this case, Ezra McCandless?
I am.
How did you become familiar with the defendant?
I met her at Racy's Coffee Shop in Eau Claire, probably a year previous.
Okay. And were you aware that the defendant at some point in time became involved in a relationship with Alex Woodworth?
I was.
How did you become aware of that?
She was at my house a lot and spent many nights there in Alex's room.
All right. And where was your room in relation to Alex's room?
We shared a wall, so it would have been to the right.
All right. And how's the soundproofing in that apartment?
It's not wonderful. I could hear a lot of laughter and giggling late into the night.
And was that coming from Alex's room?
Yes.
And was that when the defendant was there with him?
Yes.
Did it become a problem for you?
Eventually, I had to get some earplugs.
All right. Ever hear anything from that, coming from that bedroom that caused you any concern?
No.
Ever hear any arguing?
No.
Ever hear the defendant say that something like no or don't do that or that hurts or anything like that?
No.
Do you recall an occasion when the defendant made some statement about her relationship with Jason Bengal?
So I remember one specific time she was coming out of my bathroom. She had a towel on, and Alex was with her. And she told me that she broke up with Jason and asked me if I thought it was great.
And did she, how did she look at that point in time? Did she have any expression on her face?
She was smiling.
Do you see the individual in court here today that we've been talking about as being the defendant?
I do.
Could you point her out by where she is seated and what she is wearing, please?
She's sitting there with the blue shirt.
Ask the record reflect the identification of the defendant, Your Honor.
All right, the witness, record will reflect the witness has identified Ms. McCandless, the defendant.
Nothing further from Mr. Schreiner.
All
Thank
right,
you.
any cross-examination?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Schreiner, you were aware that, it sounds like Alex and Ezra were in a sexual relationship, right?
Yes.
And did you live with Alex in November of 2017? Or was it not until January of 2018 when the two of you began living together?
I lived with him in November.
Okay, and I just didn't know. I didn't mean to imply something else. So fair to say November and December of 2017, you were right next door to Alex.
Yes.
And then same for January, February, and March of 2018. Agreed?
Yes.
And it was during that time that often Ezra would be over at your apartment, right?
It was from September to, I guess, early springtime.
Okay, till sometime in late February probably. Does that sound about right?
Sure.
And again, early springtime in Wisconsin changes every year, right? But it's about that time when she would be over there, right?
I'm not sure what you're
I
asking.
just want to make sure we're on the same page. The times that you're talking about, it sounds, are from September of 2017 till February, late February of 2018. That's the time period you're referring to. Agreed?
Yes.
All right. And you worked during that time period. Agreed?
Yes.
And I think you said it, but did you get up at 2 a.m., you said, to go to work?
At 2 a.m. or 1 a.m.
Okay. So kind of in the middle of the night is when you would work through the early morning hours. Agreed?
Yes.
And then was your sleep schedule, you'd come home from work and you'd go right to sleep, or would you try to start your day and go to sleep later in the afternoon? What was your sleep schedule?
I'll go to sleep about 8 o'clock
In the morning?
at night.
Okay, so you go to sleep at 8 o'clock, you'd wake up around 1 a.m., 2 a.m. when you had to go to work, is that right?
Yes.
And then from that time, you'd work until the next morning, 8, 10 o'clock?
Into the afternoon.
Okay, and then you do your daily life activities in the afternoons, right?
Yes.
And then your morning started around 7 or 8 p.m. Or, excuse me, your evening when you went to sleep, your bedtime was 7 or 8 p.m.
Yes.
Okay. And it was during this bedtime where at some point you decided you didn't want to listen to what was going on in the room next door, that you got earplugs, correct?
Yes.
And those earplugs, I imagine, solved the problem for you, right?
Mostly.
Yeah, once you put the earplugs in, you couldn't hear what was going on next door, correct?
I could still hear some things.
Sure. But not as clearly.
Not clearly.
I mean, that's why you got the earplugs, so that you could be prevented from hearing what was going on next door, right?
Yes.
And it worked. Agreed?
Yes.
But, and I would imagine it didn't take you long to be motivated to get those earplugs. You probably got those in November or December of 2017?
Yes.
And you continued to have those earplugs November, December, January, February time to, again, help solve that problem, that I'm calling it a problem, but to solve your having to hear what's going on next door, right?
Yes.
You've spoken with the police about this, is that right?
Yes.
And at one point you told the police about how there was a time that you'd actually heard Ezra yell. Is that right?
Yes.
And that wasn't something that the state just asked you about, did they?
No.
Okay, but there was a time where you said she had to yell at Alex one time, right?
Yes.
And you could tell that she was angrily yelling, correct?
Yes.
But it was that one time that you recall that you'd had, correct?
Yes.
Was this before you got the earplugs or during the earplugs?
I believe it was during the earplugs.
Okay, so what else you could or couldn't hear because of the earplugs, you don't know. Agreed?
Yes.
You'd also, like I think, did you hang out at, well, I want to ask you about a time in December or January. Were you at your apartment when Jason Mangle, do you know who Jason Mangle is?
Yes.
Do you recall the time Jason Mangle came to your apartment to provide aid for your roommate?
Yes.
All right, and your understanding was that he was there to patch up Alex's arm, correct?
Correct.
Or his wrist had been cut, correct?
I'm not sure if it was his wrist, but it was on his arm.
Okay, whether it was his wrist, his forearm, or some other place, it was on his appendage, right?
Yes.
And I think in previous conversations, you've called that an accident in quotes, is that right?
I said that Alex told me that it was an accident.
Correct.
And
And you've described that to other people, you've used the term accident, but you've always put it in quotes, agreed?
not always.
Yeah, fair enough. You've had occasion to put the word accident in quotes when describing what happened to Alex's arm, right?
Yes.
And you used those quotes because you weren't sure whether it was or it wasn't an accident.
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled on that. If it would be this witness did it, so you can answer the question.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. You put it in quotes because you weren't sure whether it was an actual accident or whether it was just alleged to be an accident. Agreed?
Yes.
All right. Those are the only questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, any redirect?
Just as it relates to the incident when you heard the defendant yelling, could you tell what she was yelling about?
No.
All right. And approximately when was that, if you recall?
It was late. I don't recall.
Okay.
Probably after 10 p.m.
Okay. I guess, and that was a bad question, that's my fault, because it wasn't clear what I meant by that. Do you recall approximately what month it was when that occurred?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I've got.
Any recross?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schreiner. You may step down, and I believe you would be released. Is that true? Okay, so you're free to go? Okay, go ahead.
Can you please state, state and spell your last name for the record? Vandezande, Vandezande. And what's your first name? Jenna. And what is your occupation? I'm a library worker. And do you know the defendant, Ezra McCandless? Yes. When did you first meet the defendant? In late June of 2017. And how did you meet her? At Racy's coffee shop. And did you become friends with the defendant? Yes. Do you recall when you were friends with her? What time frame? From around the time that we met at Racy's until March of 2018. And do you know Jason Mengel? Yes. How do you know him? He is my boyfriend, Alex Zink's former roommate. And did you know that, so Jason Mengel and your boyfriend, Alex Zink, shared an apartment together? Yes. And had you been to that apartment before? Yes, many times. And how big is the apartment? Can you describe kind of how many bedrooms, bathrooms? It is 700 square feet, 2 bed, 1 bath. And did you know if the defendant and Jason Mengel were involved in a romantic relationship? Yes. And at some point, did the defendant and Jason Mengel move in together, reside together? Yes. And did you spend time with the defendant? Yes, at the apartment and elsewhere. And when you spent time with the defendant, would she talk to you about her relationship with Jason Mengel? Yes. Do you specifically recall going on a walk with the defendant around September of 2017? Yes, on the bike trail in Eau Claire. And what, if anything, do you recall the defendant telling you during that walk about her relationship with Jason Mengel? She disclosed to me that earlier on in the summer, in mid-August, she had gone to the Twin Cities in Minnesota to have an abortion. And how did you respond? I said that she could talk to me about it if she wanted to, and gave her a hug, and told her that was a really hard thing to go through, and
that I was sorry that she had to deal with that.
And did she tell you anything else about her relationship with Jason Mengel during that walk?
She stated that since the procedure that he had been pretty distant from her. I had noticed that he had been sleeping downstairs on the couch away from her and had wondered about it, and she said that she believed it was because he felt differently about her after the abortion.
And is there anything else she told you about regarding Jason Mengel sleeping on the couch?
She said that she had felt like a distance between them since the procedure and that he had been refusing any kind of physical intimacy, including sex.
And did the defendant talk to you about Alexander Woodworth while you were friends with her?
She mentioned that she was friends with him, that he was a great confidant, that they had gone on walks together, and that he was a good friend.
In February of 2018, were you living in that apartment as well?
No.
But at some point in February of 2018, did you learn the defendant moved out of the apartment that she shared with Jason Mengel?
Yes.
What did she tell you about that?
She messaged me on Facebook and stated that she didn't feel comfortable in the relationship anymore. She wanted to talk to him about boundaries, and that after he returned from military drill, that she would be breaking up with him and moving out.
And did you locate those Facebook messages and provide them to law enforcement?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 405. How many pages is that document?
3.
And what does it contain?
The conversation between her and I that she stated that she was going to end things with Jason Mengel.
And what date is this conversation?
February 5th of 2018.
And is this an accurate copy of the conversation as you recall it?
Yes.
Move Exhibit 405 into evidence.
All right, subject to objection, which is preserved for the record, the court will receive Exhibit 405.
I request to publish that for the jury.
You may.
Judge, I'm going to object to the reading of it. It's in evidence. She can publish it. The state certainly can publish it, but I don't think we need witnesses to read what's written. If she wants to display it to the jury, she's certainly welcome to do that, but we don't need people reading every written word that we're introducing into evidence.
Well, I'm going to give counsel some latitude to publish it in the manner that she would like to publish it, and I'm sure that, there's going to come a time there'll be some things that you'll want to publish in a certain way that the state may object to, but I think let counsel make their presentation in the manner that they choose. So if you wish to read some of it, show it, you may do that. It's not particularly lengthy, so go ahead.
Thank you. So this area I'm pointing to, and it's a little bit hard to see, but is that a picture that you associated with the defendant?
Yes, that was her profile picture on Facebook at the time.
And this line below, nice, with the smiley face, like defining more boundaries in the relationship, is that your message?
Yes.
And the defendant stated like ending the relationship, is that right?
Yes.
And did she tell you in this message that the relationship had gotten bad and she cannot be mistreated anymore?
Yes.
And did you respond with, I understand?
Yes.
And why did you respond that way?
She had been talking in the previous weeks about how she had not felt that there was as strong of a connection as there had been before, and that she still really loved him but didn't know if it was the right relationship to be in.
And then she responds that it's not healthy, we have a zero communication. We have zero communication. And why do you respond with, yeah, his communication style is ... complicated?
I was trying to be tactful in my response. Jason Mengel's communication style is incredibly complicated. He unfortunately has not learned that words have the power to hurt people, regardless of your intention of those words, and often uses the excuse of trying to be honest when really he just sounds like a jerk.
And do you have an example of that regarding the defendant's appearance that she shared with you?
I overheard a conversation between them where he told her that her makeup looked clownish, disregarding the fact that she had been wearing a lot of makeup to cover up acne at the time, and I thought that was a very insensitive thing to say.
And so is that sort of provided context to your response?
Yes.
And the defendant then discusses with you how she was going to sit down and talk to Jason, and that she's in a bad spot right now?
Yes.
And how did you respond?
Yeah, I hadn't seen all of the interactions that she had told me about, like things that he had said to her. I had not witnessed them, so I was going off of what she had told me in confidence. She mentioned to me many times, don't talk to him about it. I don't want you to get involved, so I stayed out of it as much as I could. But based on his interactions with others of our friends, I took her at her word because he sometimes can be complicated.
And the defendant then writes, "It's been bad. I've lost confidence. I hate my body. I hate my face." Is that right?
Yes.
And how did you respond?
That's a lot of hurtful red flags. That's a lot of hurtful red flags. If you're feeling that way with a partner, that's probably not a great relationship to be in.
And did she say that he called me retarded, one of the most offensive things to me, and I know he doesn't like me the way he did before the abortion. Is that right?
Yes.
And what did you believe that he was referring to?
I had not heard him say the word retarded to her. That is an offensive term, but based on his interactions with her after the abortion, I also agreed that he seemed a bit distant.
And then turning to the third page, the defendant responds, and he's been hurt also. I love him, but this isn't healthy. How did you respond?
I said, if that's how you're feeling, then you need to definitely talk to him about it. But you really shouldn't be in a relationship with someone that treats you that way.
And then do you inform the defendant that it's better to talk in person?
Yes, she stated that she would be talking to him in person when he returned from drill.
And then does your conversation continue about the defendant's trying to find a place to live?
Yes.
Thank you. And all of those conversations or those messages on Facebook, those all occurred on February 5th?
Yes.
At any time around that date, did the defendant mention to you anything that occurred with John Hansen?
No.
Did you ever observe Jason Mingle yell at the defendant?
I had not witnessed it myself, but I had heard from others that he had an explosive reaction at Razy's coffee shop.
Okay. And is that when he had confronted Alex?
No, it was in the weeks prior, but I don't know what the argument was about.
Around, March 19th of 2018, do you recall going to the bar with Jason Mingle?
Yes.
And did you go to the joint?
Yes.
And do you recall making a statement to Jason Mingle about his relationship with the defendant when you were at the bar with him?
Yes, we talked extensively about their relationship, and he stated to me that...
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained unless there's some,
No, I just want to know what you told Jason during that conversation at the bar, not Jason's response.
Objection, hearsay, irrelevant.
And what's the purpose?
So this is March 19th, a few days before the incident in question. I believe her statement to Jason Mengel is relevant to some events that are going to occur right after this.
Can we,
Yeah, let's do a sidebar. Okay, you can go ahead. Objection is overruled in part.
So did you have a conversation with Jason Mengel on March 19th of 2018?
Yes,
And after that conversation, did you have a phone call from the defendant or receive a phone call?
yes.
And what did the defendant tell you during that phone call?
She stated that it was my fault that Jason had texted her breaking up with her. She said I needed to fix it, that I needed to wake him up and talk to him about it immediately. That it was, she repeated multiple times that it was my fault, that things were not going the way that they should have been, that I was getting involved in a situation that I was not supposed to be in. And then she told me, Jenna, I heard that you don't believe that I was assaulted.
And how did you
And-
respond?
I was crying. I felt like a bad friend. I apologized multiple times. I said that there had been so many things going on that I didn't know what to believe anymore. And I just kept profusely apologizing. But the hair on the back of my neck stood up the entire conversation because she was talking in the same tone that I am right now. And if you were accusing of someone of not believing that you were raped, I would think you would be a bit more upset about it. And so I was very unnerved the entire conversation.
And meanwhile, while the defendant's calm, you're crying.
Yes.
And so what, if anything, did you do after, well, I guess how long was this conversation with the defendant?
About an hour and 15 minutes.
And how do you know that it occurred on March 19th of 2018?
It was the day after my birthday, and that phone call will haunt me for the rest of my life.
And so did you do anything after that phone conversation?
I sat down on the curb because I had been out walking, collected my thoughts, kind of shook it off, and then went back to Alex Sink and Jason Mengel's apartment where Jason was asleep and Alex Sink, my boyfriend, was still awake. I told him that I did not want to be involved in Ezra or Jason's relationship anymore, and I needed to tell him that, but because Jason was asleep and unable to be woken up, I decided I should write a letter instead of texting it. And then I took a picture of that letter because in this day and age, you can't be too careful about people mincing your words or switching them around, so I wanted to make sure I had a record of it.
And did you provide, law enforcement with a copy of that letter?
Yes, I sent them the picture that I took.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 677. Do you recognize that item in front of you?
Yes,
And what is it?
it's the letter that I wrote to Jason.
And is that your handwriting?
Yes,
And that's the same letter you wrote on March 19th of 2018?
yes.
And how did you get that letter to Jason Mengel?
I left it on the coffee table next to him so that he would see it when he woke up.
I'd move Exhibit 677 into evidence.
All right, again, subject to objections that have been made, been preserved for the record, court will receive Exhibit 677.
And I would like Ms. Vandezande to read that letter to the jury.
All right, but and this is, again, and perhaps should tell the jury, I'm receiving the letter for what it is and where it was and the circumstances. And at some point here, particularly when the court instructs you, and maybe before the instructions, before deliberations, the court will provide a little bit more instruction as to how you are to use some of this type of evidence we call panorama evidence. I am not receiving the letter for the truth of what is said in the letter. I'm receiving the letter as just part of the story, the background of the circumstances and events leading up to March 22nd and including March 22nd, 2018. And so it is part of, again, this witness's testimony. So Exhibit 677 is being received in evidence, but again, not for, as we refer to it, the truth of the matter asserted in the letter, but is, again, part of the circumstances. Okay, and so go ahead. Read the letter, but again, it may be for how it may have affected the state of mind of the defendant, and how she may have felt about that, and again, as part of the overall picture. So with that caution, go ahead and you can read the letter.
Ms. Vandezande, if you could read Exhibit 677.
I'm gonna ask you to read it slowly.
Hey, talked with Ez. We were able to discuss some questions I had and things that we were confused about. I think I've been operating from a place of miscommunication and not having much of the whole story until now, after talking to her. I'm sorry if I conflicted your thoughts. I'm planning on staying out of this all from now on. You guys need to talk and work on what you will, in whatever way works for you guys. Jenna.
Thank you. And I'd also move Exhibit 519, the photograph as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'd also move Exhibit 519, the photograph of Exhibit 677 as well.
Any objection to the photograph?
Nothing other than what's been previously noted.
Okay, so subject to those previous objections, I assume it's a photograph of the same letter. Is that right, Ms. Noto?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit 519 will also be received, again, ladies and gentlemen, basically for the same reasons that Exhibit 677. 677 is the actual letter. Exhibit 519 is I believe, a picture, a photo of the letter. Okay.
And then, Judge, could we have a sidebar for another matter?
All right, go ahead. Okay, there was no objection on the table. We did have a sidebar.
I have no further questions.
Okay, cross-examination.
Thank you. Ms. Vandezande, did I
Yes.
pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
I know this isn't the best way to meet somebody, and the first question to ask, but how old are you?
26.
And your boyfriend is Matthew Schreiner?
No, Alex Zink,
I apologize, okay. Alex Zink. How old is Alex Zink?
31.
I just want to get the context of this. So Alex Zink, your boyfriend, was living with Jason Mengel, is that right?
Yes.
It's a two-bedroom apartment, agreed?
Yes.
You never lived there, agreed?
I lived there later in May 2018 until February, late February of 2019.
You never lived there from the period of June 2018 until June 2017 until March 2018, the time period where you were talking about when you knew Ezra McCandless, agreed?
Yes.
You were dating in a relationship with Alex Zink during that time, right?
Yes.
But you weren't living there, agreed?
Yes.
So I want to then kind of fast forward to this letter here at the end. Sounds like, you wrote the letter, but it sounds like at the end you're like, I'm out. Is that basically what it was?
Yes.
You've been hearing stuff from Jason Mengel, and you've been hearing stuff from Ezra McCandless, and you've been in, maybe the lack of a better term, the middle of this relationship, and you're just like, I'm done with both of you.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes.
There was, in your opinion, just a lot of drama going on
Yes.
between Ezra and Jason and others at Racy's, right?
Yes.
lots of people were talking about lots of different things regarding Ezra and Jason and other men, right?
I had not heard about other men at this point.
Okay. But you'd heard lots of people, including Jason and Ezra, talk about Jason and Ezra's relationship.
Yes,
Others just than them, correct?
yes,
Just, again, I don't want the content, but just general, there was gossip and drama around those two people in their relationship at the Racy's coffee shop, right?
yes,
And as you put in here in your letter, you, I think, put in there fairly, I'm guessing, that you were confused about a lot of different stuff because you were hearing all kinds of different things, right?
yes,
And it's something you put in here even, I think, you were, I think it was very well wrote, you were operating from a place of miscommunication, is that right?
yes,
And that was again because you'd been in the middle of this drama and hearing all kinds of stuff, and at that point you're just like, I don't know who's saying what or when or why, and I want nothing more to do with it.
yes,
Okay. And that was the purpose of your writing this letter to Jason, correct?
yes,
And you hand-delivered the letter to a place in Jason's apartment where he was at, agreed?
yes.
And this was this on then the early morning hours or morning hours of March 20th? Or was it still on March 19th?
I believe I left the apartment after writing the letter around midnight.
Okay, so midnight of March 19th going into the next day, March 20th.
Yes,
All right. You didn't give a copy of this letter to Ezra McCandless, correct?
no,
What you had communicated with Ezra McCandless was done by phone prior to your writing the letter, right?
yes,
It sounds like when you spoke with Ezra, you were upset, right?
yes,
Not necessarily at her, but just you were upset about all of this drama and you're being dragged into it?
yes,
And it sounded like Ezra was also upset, correct?
during the phone call, not so much. The words sounded like they would have been upset, more angry than sad.
Okay, so the content did not necessarily resonate with the tone, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay, but the content certainly made it, you thought, from the content, she sounds upset.
yes,
Upset about how her relationship with Jason was going or not going, so to speak, right?
yes,
That's what the whole conversation was about Ezra and Jason, right?
yes, and then the later mention of not believing that she had been assaulted by John Hanson.
Okay. And you'd never spoken with John Hanson, agreed?
I have spoken with John Hanson
At
prior.
that time, you'd spoken with John Hanson before?
He had been at Racy's coffee shop for years prior, so I had had multiple interactions with him as more of a how's your day going?
Okay, so you knew who John Hanson was.
Yes,
And how old's John Hanson, do you know?
early 30s.
Okay. And he's a Army veteran, is that right?
Yes, he was friends with Jason Mengel and would frequently come over to the apartment to hang out.
Okay, because they were kind of Army buddies?
Yes, they, I believe, had also met at Racy's.
All right. And these, John Hanson's about the same size as Jason Mengel?
About the same height and build, yes.
And how tall are you?
5'6".
All right. And Ezra's McCandless is considerably shorter than you, right?
Objection relevance.
What is there some relevance to that?
Yes, the state's introduced information about her size, and this is a witness who lived with her and knows her size, and so certainly has the foundation to testify about it.
But what is the relation or the comparison between this witness and Ms. McCandless have to do with anything?
You want me to articulate it now, or you want me to articulate it on the side?
Well, all right, counsel, I mean, if you,
I'm happy to do it here, I just don't want to overstep.
okay, let's do sidebar. Objection overruled, we may answer.
Thank you. Think of it, you're several inches taller than Ezra McCandless, right?
Yes,
So if you're 5'6", she's 5'2", 5'3", in that ballpark based upon your contact with her?
yes,
Okay. I think I was asking you about John Hanson before that. have you, prior to March 19th, speaking with Ms. McCandless on the phone, that time period, are you with me?
Yes.
I just want to know, I don't want to know the content, I just want to ask whether you had a conversation with John Hanson about the investigation regarding a sexual encounter that John Hanson and Ezra McCandless may or may not have had.
No.
Okay, so on the 19th, you hadn't yet spoke with John Hanson about that allegation/investigation, agreed?
Agreed.
Fair to say that around, you hung out at Racy's Coffee Shop, is that right? I mean, by hung out, I didn't mean like every day, but you were there?
As this whole situation seemed to unfold, I spent less and less time there.
Okay, and probably part of the reason you spend less and less time there is because there's a lot of drama going on there, right?
Yes.
It was not a, for lack of a better term, happy place?
No, not at the time.
There was a lot of people talking about a lot of other people in ways that didn't make you feel good at least, correct?
Yes.
And you wanted to be away from that negativity.
Yes.
So I want to take us back now to the walk that you'd said you'd done with Ezra, okay?
Yes.
I believe you had said that the walk was in September when you did this, when you
Yes.
went on this walk with Ms. McCandless. If I told you that the procedure didn't happen until October, would that change your opinion, your memory about when you think this walk happened? Are you definitive on September, or is that just kind of a ballpark?
It was cold enough to wear a coat. It was definitely the end of September, early October.
Okay, so it may have been sometime in early October that you had this conversation with her, correct?
Yes.
But what you know, it was a conversation after the procedure, the abortion, right?
Yes.
So whenever that abortion took place, it was sometime after that you took this walk with Ms. McCandless, correct?
Yes.
And it was during that walk where she was expressing with you her, I don't want, if these aren't the right words, tell me, but she was expressing her feelings about that operation, right?
Yes.
Feelings of shame.
I don't know if I would use the word shame.
Okay, well, what word would you use? Regret?
Discomfort.
Okay. From a physical standpoint, an emotional standpoint, or both?
Both. She had talked about how it was pretty painful and she'd had complications after that, and that's why she'd been sick and in bed a lot of the weeks leading up to this walk between us, and then also her discomfort and feelings of distance between her and Jason.
Okay, and so she'd expressed that the father of the aborted baby was Jason, right?
Yes.
And that he had not, she felt left alone. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. After the procedure, she had felt like there had been more distance.
Okay. She didn't, did she say like she wasn't getting the love and support that she wanted, something along those lines, or are those not the right words?
Support would be a good word to choose, yes.
Okay. And she was sharing that with you as just somebody else that she knew, an older female friend, right?
Yes.
And I imagine you were supportive,
Yes.
empathized, and gave her some of the support that she was looking for in that moment, right?
I tried to, yes.
Sure. And it was around that time, do you recall the trip do you remember Jason leaving and not being at the apartment for a week, 2 weeks, some time period like that around this time of the walk?
Yes, he had gone out to the West Coast with a friend.
Okay. And it was around that time when he's gone up to the West Coast with a friend that Ezra and you have this walk in which she shares her feelings with you?
I believe the conversation that we had on that walk happened shortly before Jason went out west.
Okay, so she expressed this feeling of lacking support to you, and then very soon after that, Jason was gone.
I believe a few weeks after that, yes.
Okay. And prior to that, you had made observations of Jason sleeping on the couch, right?
Yes.
So what she had told you about the distance, you observed with your own eyes as well.
Yes.
And then I want to ask you about this Facebook communication that you talked about on February 5th, okay?
Yes.
I don't know that we, I'm just going to hand you Exhibit 405. You need to, that's already in evidence, so you can certainly look at that. Ms. McCandless in there, again, I'm probably not going to quote word for word, but if you need that to refresh, certainly look at it. Ms. McCandless was telling you that she was wanting to break up with Jason. Is that right?
Yes.
And I think her words were because it wasn't healthy. Is that right?
Yes.
And then she told you, I think on the last page, she told you, it's really hard, but I have to talk to him. Is that right?
Yes.
You knew Ezra at the time, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, did it sound consistent with what you knew of Ezra, is that she wanted to go and have this face-to-face with another person about this emotional matter, right?
Yes.
And you were encouraging her to do that, correct?
Yes.
Because you're a bit older than her, not a lot, but a bit older, right?
Yes.
And Jason's certainly older, that whole, Alex Zink is older, John Hansen is older. She's the youngest one in that friend group, right?
Yes.
And her, well, for whatever reason, whether it's generational or not, you were encouraging her to have this conversation in person, right?
Yes.
Because that's what you thought is just how two human beings should interact when they've been in a relationship and they want to move on from that relationship. The healthiest way to do that is a face-to-face contact, right?
Yes.
And that's what you were supporting her to do in that matter, right?
Yes.
And do you know, did she then do that at some point, face-to-face with Jason?
To my knowledge, no, until much later.
And much later then, they had a face-to-face because they then ended up getting back together, right?
Yes. I had heard 2 days after this
I don't wanna
conversation
know
that
about
she had
what you-
texted him
Okay.
and broken up with him through text.
And, okay, and so, and when she broke up through text, fair to say, did you speak with her about that?
No, I was disappointed.
Okay. And did you ever get the chance to express that disappointment to her, that you thought it would be better for human beings to contact each other in person rather than through text when they're dealing with these emotional matters?
No, after she moved out, we didn't speak much.
Okay. Did you talk with her about that at all by the time of the time of March 19th, when you had the phone conversation with her about your disappointment about her communicating emotional things through text rather than in person? Or were you already done with kind of all of the drama between Jason and Ezra?
Yes, I tried to stay out of it as much as I could after she had moved out.
Okay, you were just like, you're much older, you didn't have time for some of this teenage drama with a 19-year-old, right?
Yes.
That's all, thank you.
Any redirect?
You were asked about some gossip at Racy's. Was your opinion on John Hansen based on your observations or on gossip?
Objection, I don't believe there was opinion evidence, I don't believe there was any evidence about what the gossip was. It's irrelevant, lay opinions are.
Sustained.
When the defendant was living at the apartment with Alex and Jason, you were there frequently?
Yes,
Like, how frequently would you go there?
almost every night,
And would you spend the night?
maybe twice or 3 times a week.
And on March 19th, when you wrote that letter in front of you, Exhibit 677, was that your way of doing what the defendant instructed you to do?
Yes.
Nothing else?
Okay, any recross?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, Ms. Vandezande, you may step down. I believe you're probably excused. Any reason that she is not released from her subpoena?
No.
Okay, you're good to go. Thank you. Have a good day.
Can I get those exhibits?
Could you tell us your name, please, and spell your name for the court reporter?
Yes, my name is Kort, K-O-R-T, Fox, F-O-X.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm a server/cook at the Grand Avenue Cafe in Eau Claire.
And are you familiar with, or did you know Alex Woodworth?
Oh, very well.
How did you get to know Alex?
We were students together. He was a philosophy major, I was a philosophy minor. We had some courses together, and I just got to know him through that, and then we became fast friends after that.
And would you meet with him in the evenings?
Oh, many times.
All right, and where would you generally meet?
The Joint.
And what's the joint?
It is a bar.
All right, and can you spell the joint, by the way? I think it's,
Joynt.
okay. I thought it had an unusual spelling, so I
Yeah.
just wanted to be sure the record was correct. When you guys would get together at the joint, what would you talk about?
Mainly philosophy.
And did Alex have, and this is pretty much the only question I'm going to ask, did he have a particular area that he was interested in philosophy?
Mainly ethics.
Okay. Now, did you also become aware of the relationship that the defendant had with Alex?
Yeah, in November he did mention it.
And did he discuss his relationship with you in detail?
That was right when it was getting started, and
Objections withdrawn, Judge.
Okay, and I'm just going to mark this one off. Okay. Go
Did
ahead.
he tell you whether or not the relationship was intimate?
not at that point.
All right, at some point, did he tell you that?
Well, after they started dating, as much as Alex was an exemplary and unique individual, he was a stereotypical guy in many ways, and I didn't see him much at all until after they had broken up.
All right,
But
so,
I was there when he first started, yay, I have a girlfriend.
okay. All right. After they broke up, did he talk to you a little more about the relationship?
Yes,
All right. And at that point, did he tell you that it had been intimate?
yes.
All right. Now, after they broke up, did you discuss with him if he was going to get back together or want to get back together with the defendant?
No, he did not.
What did he tell you about that?
Objection, hearsay.
Then existing state of mind, Your Honor.
Overruled. And objections noted, preserved for the record.
After being out of it, he still very much cared for Ezra, very much wanted her to be happy, well, and everything like that, but it was a lot of drama that he was happy to be done with. It seemed like not much at all when he was in the middle of it and very much involved, but then being able to be slightly removed, it's like, wow, that was a bit, and I'm happy to be out. And he was looking forward to continuing his writing, applying to more grad schools, and it just meant that he could focus more on that now, and he was very happy for that.
Did he say what would happen if the defendant wanted to get back together into an intimate relationship, what his response would be?
He wasn't so much afraid of that. He did say that he was afraid of just being reached out to, because he knew that she had issues, problems.
Objection.
Okay, I think we're maybe going a little bit far. So
Okay.
I'll sustain in
Okay,
terms of
that's
getting
fine.
into those details.
Did Alex indicate whether or not he had reached out for contact with the defendant after the breakup?
No.
Do you have an opinion as to Alex's character as it relates to peacefulness?
Oh my God, he was one of the kindest men I've ever met.
And as far as peacefulness,
Objection, can we, I believe last week we talked about the manner in which this can be introduced, and so I'm objecting to the manner. We take it up on sidebar if we need to.
Well, I think it's proper to ask what the opinion is.
Yes. What is your opinion as to his character for peacefulness?
I have never seen him.
Objection.
Okay,
Again, just your
My
opinion.
opinion?
Yes.
He was a very peaceful person, in my opinion.
Thank you. Did you actually know the defendant at all?
No, I've never actually met her.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Fox,
Yes.
you spoke with an investigator by name of Jason Stalker in April of 2018 about Alex, did you not?
Sounds about right, yes.
Okay. And they asked you a lot of the same questions that were asked today, is that right? Yes?
Yes.
And I believe at one point you told them, quote, you were asked about Alex and Ezra's relationship end of February, March, I think the breakup, okay?
Yes.
And your words to them were, my role as a friend during this past month was, he was a bit rocked by it, and so I was helping him through that. Those are the words that you'd said to the police?
Yes.
And you said those words because that was the truth, right?
Yes.
He was a bit rocked by it.
Yeah.
He was in love with her?
Yeah.
That's what you told the police, right?
Yes.
Okay. On March 22nd, you never saw Alexander Woodward. Agreed?
I did not.
And as you've said, you've actually never seen Ezra McCandless in any real context.
No, never spoken a word to her.
Okay, so you also don't know anything, you don't know what Ezra was doing on the 22nd of March, and you don't know what Alex was doing on the 22nd of March. Fair to say?
Yep.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions.
Go ahead.
When was your last discussion with Alex about his relationship with the defendant
Oh,
in relation to his death on March 22nd?
it wasn't more than 3 days prior at most.
And when was it that you were referring to when you said that Alex was a bit rocked by the breakup?
In February.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else.
Any recross?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fox. You may step down. I believe you're